To be removed and separated from your home, from your family and your community because you are a victim of abuse, this has to be hard. This has to be hard for anybody. But today we're talking about children. I've been in the field of child welfare now for 27 years, and I can still remember the very first time I had to remove a child from their home because they were a victim of abuse. I was 2 weeks into the job. This was a slight 8-year-old little boy, and he had severe bruising up and down his back and down his legs. And he told me that his dad had beat him and that he had beat him badly. So I told this little boy to tell me a story. And he told me that his dad had soccer kicked him hard, really hard, and twice. He said that his dad had never done anything like that before, but this time he was really mad. He quivered as he told me his story, and I think he quivered because he knew that he wasn't supposed to be telling me this, but he found the courage to tell me. I can't imagine how scared he must have been in that moment. So, being 2 weeks on the job, I consulted with my supervisor. A short while later, the police arrived. We interviewed that little boy again. We interviewed that mother. We interviewed the father. And in less than an hour, in less than 1 hour, we made a decision to remove that child from that home. I can't believe how quickly and routinely that decision was made. So I remember the look on this mother's face as I left the home with her son. She just looked helpless. I remember the look on the father's face as I left the home with his son. He looked embarrassed and humiliated. There were no goodbyes, there were no hugs. We just left. I am the father of 2 boys. I cannot imagine what it would be like for somebody to walk into my home and to leave with my boys. Even if I had harmed them, I cannot imagine how I would ever recover from something like that. The ride to the foster home was really quiet. We got to the foster home. I walked up the steps. I was about to ring the doorbell, and he grabbed my hand. He must have been so scared. The foster parent answered the door, and she was amazing. She was full of life, full of love. She was just so warm and welcoming. And we sat at that kitchen table, and I remember just thinking about all the tasks that I had to complete. I had to fill in forms, medical information, personal information, complaints processes, and I remember being so focused on making sure that this 8-year-old boy knew his rights as a child in care. So I talked to him about his rights as a child in care, this little 8-year-old boy. He looked at me. I don't think he heard a word I said. He looked at me mostly with fear in his eyes. But I was relieved that I was getting through all the things that I had to get through. And as I was leaving, feeling quite proud of myself that I had done everything that I had to do, this little boy grabbed my hand hard, and with tears in his eyes, he looked at me and he goes, "You're leaving?" And so that kind of floored me, kind of stopped me in my tracks as I was trying to do all my things. And I didn't realize that at the time, but in those few short hours, I had become his safety net. You know, I had taken him from his home. I had taken him from the only safety and security that he had ever known. And he had experienced a separation of trauma from his parents, and he just was not ready to experience that again. And I can tell you that prying that little hand off of my hand and leaving that foster home was hard. It was hard. And I left, and I thought, he's safe, right? He's safe. He's not going to get soccer kicked tonight. He's safe. But he's alone. He's scared. He's got no one to call. He's going to go to bed tonight. He's not going to know when he's going to see his mom or his dad again, and he's going to be alone. He's not going to get hurt. He's not going to get kicked. But is he safe? That is a different and that is a complicated question. I can still recall this experience with vivid clarity. And it tells me that we know that children do best when they can stay at home and in their communities. It is really, really, really hard for governments and systems to raise children and expect those children to do well. It is a simple truth that it is hard for governments and systems to raise children. I don't know what happened to that little boy 27 years ago, but I hope that he went home. I hope that he went home. I hope that he didn't have to grow up in care because of one really, really bad day that his dad had. And I know that there are lots of young people here today that have grown up in care, and I congratulate you because you show tremendous courage, tremendous resilience, tremendous strength, and we have so much to learn from you. We have so much to learn about how we can do better. But what we do know is that the work of child welfare has to be about coordinating communities that surround families to make them stronger. Our work needs to be about helping families and communities protect their own children and less about protecting children from their families. So I want to say that again. Our work needs to be about helping families protect their own children and less about protecting families from their children. Protecting children from their families. We know that children do best when they are at home, yet we have tens and thousands of children that are in care in the province, and we have hundreds and thousands of children that are in care across the country. So how has this happened? How have we created a system that was designed to protect the most vulnerable children in our community that has led to so many unintended consequences? We know that we do some good work and we know that we've helped lots of children, but there's some really dark moments that are associated with children's aid societies. The 60s scoop, the residential school systems, many, many marginalized communities do not trust children's aid societies and are afraid of them. And we know that there are very poor outcomes for children who grow up in care versus children who do not grow up in care. So how has this happened? One reason is that we have not examined how our view of certain people and certain communities informs our decisions about risk. If you are Indigenous, if you are Black, if you live in poverty, if you live in certain communities, there is a much greater likelihood that you are going to intersect with the child welfare system. We have a bias about who we believe is at risk and who is not. Let's be honest, we're not getting calls about families that live in the wealthy neighborhoods of Toronto. We know that there are children at risk in those communities, and those are not the communities that we are getting calls about. When we approach our work from our position of privilege, we do not examine our bias. And when we do not examine our bias, we cause unintentional harm. The social workers that participated in the 60s scoop, they thought they were doing good work. They thought they were doing good work. They had no way of knowing that years later, people would describe their work as cultural genocide and that they were destroying entire communities. They had no way of knowing that. I ask you to reflect for a minute on what you saw when I described that little 8-year-old boy. What type of house did he live in? What did his parents look like? What was their socioeconomic status? What was the color of their skin? Who do you see when I describe that 8-year-old boy? You'll be surprised to know that he came from a very wealthy, upper middle class family. His parents were professionals and they were educated, and it was a white family. But chances are that's not the picture that you saw. We introduce risk where it doesn't exist simply because of our biases. We also have to examine how our view of risk extends to entire extended families and to entire communities. Currently, our biases extend to the fact that when we see risk in a certain situation, we extend that risk to extended families and to communities. And that is so clear with what has happened to the child welfare system and how it has intersected with our Indigenous communities. We have globalized that risk to entire communities. And that's why today's conversation about examining and redefining communities is so important. We have to see the communities that surround vulnerable children as strong, as caring, as capable, and as competent. Just because we see risk in a certain family and in a certain situation, it does not mean that that risk extends to entire communities. We are currently working with a 5-month-old baby who has a number of broken bones to his legs and broken ankles. The parents have told us that they have no idea how these injuries have occurred. The medical information is strong, and the medical information is telling us that these injuries were not accidental. I can tell you that a few years ago, that child would have been apprehended from that home, and those parents would have had a very difficult time getting that child back, given the nature of the injuries and given his age. They may never have gotten that child back. But today, because we were able to wrap a community around that family, uncles, aunts, grandparents, neighbors, church members, that child is safer today than that child has ever been. And there is a strong system of support around that family, and that child is safe. The police called one of the parents and informed them that they were going to be charged with the crime of assaulting that baby. After that parent got the call from the police, the very first person that parent called was the social worker to thank them, to say even though they don't know what's going to happen to them, they know that their child and that their family is stronger than it's ever been before because of the community of support that is wrapped around them. It is a powerful example of what we can do when we coordinate systems and when we coordinate families to help vulnerable children. And this approach does not mean that we don't pay attention to risk or that we are not vigilant to risk. It means the exact opposite. It means that we pay even more attention to risk, and we make understanding risk our fundamental priority. That little boy who was soccer kicked, his bruises will heal. But how do you heal from the fear and the trauma that he experienced that night? How do you heal from going to bed and not knowing when you're going to see your parents again? That is a difficult thing to heal from. And that will stay with him forever. And that experience that those parents experience, that will stay with them forever. Risk is a complex thing, and it comes in many forms. This brings me to my final point, and that we have to see risk in its entirety. When we only focus on the risk that's in front of us, when we only focus on the broken bones and the injuries and the high-risk adolescent behavior, we miss the opportunity to practice from prevention. We miss the opportunity to build families and their systems of support and make families stronger. And it benefits everyone when we build stronger families and when we build stronger communities. We're doing better, but we have a long way to go. The marginalized communities that have intersected with child welfare in a negative way are not ready to hear about the fact that we're doing better work, because we still know that disproportionality is a big problem. At the Children's Aid Society of Toronto, we're making permanency a foundation of our values and our service principles, and we fundamentally believe that children belong at home. We are committed to this journey, but we know that we are at the beginning of this journey. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, there are hundreds of thousands of children in care across Canada, but what should motivate us is that every parent wants to be a good parent. Every parent wants to succeed. Even parents that harm their children want to be successful. Less judgment and more help. The most powerful thing that a child who had grown up in care ever said to me was, "I wish you would have spent more time helping my mom. My mom wanted to be a good mom. She just needed some help. That is a powerful thing that will stay with me. Like I said at the very beginning, it is very, very hard for a child to grow up in care and be removed from their family because they are a victim of abuse. When it is not absolutely necessary, we have to spend our time helping families protect their own children and less time protecting children from their families. We have to give families the right resources, the right tools, and the right support so that they can be successful, because that's what they want. With this, we can be humble and honest about our past. We can promise to learn from our past, and with integrity, we can promise to learn from our past. But we can also, if we work in this way, we can also look forward to a very hopeful future. Thank you.